Before we wrap up this section on modifiers, I want to take a look at two more expressions. So the first expression I want to take a look at is operating on the length of the hair and having our modifier change depending on how long the hair is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down here to clumping, and I'm going to go ahead and turn off these other ones for now. And so the one thing I don't really like about this is that I don't like how the sideburn areas and the nape of the neck are clumping. Reason being is that, the smaller the hairs are, the shorter the hairs are, the less likely they are to clump and grab onto other hairs just because they have to reach and pull so much. Longer hairs, it's easier, right? It's a lot less effort for them to accidentally run into each other and start grabbing each other. But with short hair, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a little expression into my mask so that the shorter hairs are going to clump less or not at all. So the way I would do that is I'd open this up. And I might have already mentioned this before, but I want to call attention to it again, is that if you ever need to look at any reference for writing in the expression editor, I would come over here to the help tab, and it has a lot of different components like conditional operators, variables that already exist inside of XGen, and then functions that we can call on that the expression editor already has. So I come back over to the library. I'm going to call upon one of those existing variables, and that variable is going to be $, and you can see whenever you start typing in a $, it's going to list all those variables for you, and you can see them here too. I want to grab that cLength, so that's going to grab the length of my hair. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be taking the length of the hair, and then depending on the length of the hair, I'm going to clump or not clump. And so we're going to do this two different ways. First one is I'm going to type in, so I'll go ahead and assign cLength to something. So I'm going to do $length is equal to $cLength. I probably don't even need to do that. I could just call cLength normally, but I just wanted to do that for this one. All right, so in order to do, what I'm first going to do is I'm going to say, if the hair is shorter than this length, don't clump. If the hair is longer than this length, do clump. And so what that's going to do is it's going to use an if this, then do this, or if else statement. So we can see that if we go over to the help tab over here, we have that right there, x y:/z. And so this is essentially saying it's going to do a condition check on x. If x is true, then it's going to return the value y. If x is false, then it's going to return the value z. So this is going to be kind of the basis of like an if-else statement. So if this statement is true, do this thing. If it's not true, do this other thing. And here's just another way. I just wanted to write this up really quick so you guys can see. We have A, B, C, or X, Y, Z, whatever you want to call it. So that first part before the question mark is doing the condition check. We're comparing something to something else. If that comparison is true, then we return this value. And if it's false, we return this value. So the nomenclature here, or the syntax that's important, is whatever's before the question mark is a condition check, and then the first thing after the question mark is the true response, and we have a colon separating it from the false response. So if I come back down here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set it so let's go ahead and get rid of, I don't even need this anymore, so let's just come here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do a condition check. So I'm going to do $cLength is less than 2, or let's say less than or equal to 2. So I'm going to do essentially a check for the length of each hair, and I'm going to see if it's less than or equal to 2. If it's less than or equal to 2, or actually let's do greater than or equal to 2. So greater than or equal to 2. Then I do question mark, and then if it's true, I'm going to return this value, in this case 1, right, because we're working with the mask. If the length of the hair is not greater than or equal to 2, then I'm going to turn off clumping for this hair. So I'm going to set it to 0, and I'll click on apply. Click accept. And so in this case, you can see some of those are sort of clumping, but the reason why a lot of these aren't clumping is most likely because my length is too high. I set that length barrier too high because most of my hairs aren't really getting longer than 1.79. So I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to go ahead and set that to a lower value. So let's say 0.5, and click on apply. Click accept. So now you can see that any of the hairs that are less than 0.5, so these ones right here, are not getting clumped. And then all the hairs that are, as soon as they're longer than 0.5, they start clumping. So these ones over here are just slightly higher than 0.5. If I went ahead and set that to 0.6, press enter, you can see if less of those are happening. If I set that to 0.8, Press enter. Less of those are clumping, and that one just happens to be longer than 0.8. So that's one way we can set this. And so that's just using, I just want to show that for two reasons. One is showing calling a variable that XGen already has for cLength, and then also showing that condition statement, this if-else statement, which is going to be really useful. So I'm going to show you a different function that is going to be useful for this kind of setup. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and comment that out so we can call back on it if we ever want to. And we're going to use a function inside of XGen. You can find this function under the help tab, and it's going to be the fit function. And so if I come down here, let's see if I remember my alphabet, FIT, there we go. So it's going to be a linear transfer from one scale or one value range to another value range. Essentially what that's going to do is we're going to be doing a more advanced version of this length function. So I want to take the length of my hair, and I'm going to essentially look at the shortest it can be and the longest it can be. And the longest it's going to be is going to have more clumping, and the shortest it can be is going to have zero clumping. So I'm going to take the length of my hair, and if it's closer to 0 or whatever the shortest length is, I'm going to set the mask to 0. And if the length of the hair is closer to the max value, in this case 1.79, then I'm going to make sure that max value is 1 or completely on. So we're going to use that fit function for this. And let me go ahead and type that up too so you guys can see what that looks like. Here we are. So here I'm just kind of fitting, this is what the fit function looks like. We have fit, open parentheses, close parentheses is anything that has open and close parentheses is calling a function. We put in here the inputs, the parameters for that, and then it returns the result. So the inputs that the fit function wants is the variable that we're going to be adjusting, the number that we're adjusting, the min and the max value of our original value range, and the min and max value of our resulting value range. So in my case, for this example, and this is theoretical, let's say our hairs go from a length of 0.3 to 3, right? The maximum length of my hair is 3. So I want a value of 0 to 1 for my mask on this modifier, right? Because 0 is off, 1 is on. So the shorter the hair, I want the mask to be lower or have this modifier have less an effect. So short hairs, which are closer to 0.3 or 0 in length, should cause the mask value to be close to 0. Long hairs that are close to 3 in length should have more of an effect. The mask should be more or less on, so the mask value should be 1. If the length of my current hair follicle in this situation, right, if my hair goes from 0 to 3, so if my current hair, which is this one right here, is equal to 2, which is 2/3 of this range right here, then if I put that value into a new range, it should be 2/3 of this range. So that would return me a value of 0.66, for instance, for my hair is 2. So just keep that in mind. What we're doing is we're taking a value that is meant to be was originally in one value range, and we're going to make it set in a different value range so it's proportional and fits within that range. So it's the same distance from the minimum and the maximum. So back in here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in the function fit, open close parentheses. You see as soon as I type fit and open parentheses, if it's an existing function, it will tell me exactly what I need to know about how to input. You can see we have our inputs, and we also have, you can see linearly remaps x, the input, value that we're going to adjust from range A1, B1 to range A2, B2. So A1, B1, A2, B2. All right, so I'm going to be taking the cLength, $cLength, and I'm going to be fitting it from my original range, which is probably somewhere around like 0.02 to, I think mine in this case is like around 1.75. And I want to set this from 0 to 1. So 0.0 to 1.0. Okay, and click on apply. So now this one is a little bit more interesting than this one because I'm not going to have like an immediate fall off. I'm not going to have it either, like there's just like a small difference between a hair that clumps and a hair that doesn't clump. In this case, they're going to not clump, or when they're short, they're going to have very little clumping, and the longer it gets, the more clumping it has. So you can see when it's like half length, it starts to get sort of some clumping, but not quite really any. And if I wanted to, let's say, have it so I still want these to not clump, but this hair, when it gets to this length, it really should start clumping a little bit. What I can do is I can just lower this value right here. So if I lower this value right here, any values that are closer to that new max value are now going to be 1. And of course, anything that's higher than this max value is also going to be clamped to 1. So if I set that to let's say I set that one to, let's say 0.8. Say click apply. So now those shorter hairs are going to start clumping too, and of course any hairs that are longer than that are also clumping, because for the mask, any value that's above 1, because if my max value, original max value was 0.8, if I have hairs that are longer than that, then in this new range they're actually going to be higher than 1, which would be a problem in some values, right? If you did the clump value, do higher than 1 clump value, so I'll just show you. If I do 2 on my clump value, you can see you can over clump. Let's go back to that. But with a mask, you can't go over 1. Any value that's over 1 is just still on. It's not any better, any higher than that. So that's 2 different functions I want to show you guys in operating with cLength. We have a fit function, and then we have that conditional if-else statement. So we're going to take a look at the last expression I want to take a look at for now, and that's going to be the stray expression.